Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a stack of sources and really try to pull out the most important insights for you.
And we're continuing our journey through the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, the MPP, section by section.
Yep, this is a part of our bigger audio series, aiming to guide you through the MPP's core content.
Whether you're hitting the books for the patent bar or, just want a deeper grasp of U.S. patent practice, this series is designed for that.
That's right. So today we're heading into Chapter 1800. That's the one all about the Patent Cooperation Treaty, the PCT.
And specifically, Section 1802, it's titled PCT Definitions.
Definitions. Sounds basic, but I suspect it's more important than it seems.
Oh, absolutely fundamental. You really can't navigate the PCT system without understanding the specific meaning of the terms used. Section 1802 is basically your map to finding those meanings.
Okay, so our mission today is like finding the master key, the decoder ring for the PCT language, especially how it works through the USPTO.
Exactly. It's not just about listing words, it's about understanding why they're defined the way they are and, crucially, where the official definitions are located.
Got it. And our sources for this are pretty much what Section 1802 tells us to look at, right?
Precisely. We're drawing from the PCT treaty itself, the PCT rules, the administrative instructions.
And the U.S. side of things.
Yep, relevant bits of U.S. law like Title 35 and regulations like 37 CFR, all the places 1802 points to.
Okay, let's dive in then. Why kick off with definitions? I mean, it could feel a bit dry, couldn't it? Like reading a dictionary first.
It might seem that way, but, well, think about it. The PCT is this huge international agreement trying to make patent filing smoother across, over 150 countries?
Right. Harmonization is the goal.
Exactly. And how can you harmonize anything if you don't agree on what the basic terms mean? If international application meant something different in Japan versus Germany versus the U.S., well, chaos.
The whole system falls apart. Okay, I get the consistency point.
It's absolutely critical for consistency, but it goes beyond just clear communication.
How so? What are the, practical pitfalls of getting a definition wrong?
Oh, the consequences can be serious. These definitions drive procedure. Take applicant, for instance. Who qualifies? That affects who signs forms, who pays fees.
Oh.
Or think about filing date. The definition dictates when that clock starts ticking for deadlines, priority claims, entering the national stage, paying fees, mess up the interpretation, miss a deadline.
And you could lose rights entirely. Ouch. Okay.
That's that. So it's not just academic jargon. It directly impacts whether you follow the procedures correctly and whether you secure your potential patent rights.
So really, these definitions are the absolute foundation. Everything else in the PCT system, all the rules and stages, they're built on top of this shared understanding of terms.
Couldn't have said it better. They're the bedrock. Now, the interesting twist, which MPP 1802 makes clear, is that Section 1802 itself doesn't contain all these definitions.
Okay, so it's not the dictionary itself.
No, it's more like the index to the dictionary. Or maybe a guide. It tells you where to find the official, legally binding definitions you need.
Right, so if I'm looking for, say, the definition of designated state, I don't just look in 1802 itself.
Probably not for the full authoritative definition. Section 1802 will point you to where that definition lives.
Okay, and where does it point for those main core international terms, the ones everyone agrees on?
For those fundamental terms, the primary sources are the PCT treaty itself, specifically Article 2, and the PCT rules, especially Rule 2.
And the MPP helpfully includes those.
It does. MPP Appendix T has the text of PCT Article 2 and Rule 2. So those core international definitions are right there, accessible within the MPP appendices. Makes it much easier.
That is handy. What are some examples of terms defined there in Article 2 or Rule 2? The source mentioned a few.
Yeah, the key ones highlighted are things like, international application itself. That's the application actually filed under the treaty rules.
The thing that starts the whole international process.
Exactly. Then you have the receiving office. That's typically the National Patent Office where you first submit your international application. So for U.S. applicants, usually the USPTO.
Okay. Or the International Bureau itself sometimes.
Yes, that's another possibility. And then there's designated state.
Right, you mentioned that one. What exactly does that signify?
A designated state is basically any PCT member country that the applicant flags as a place they might want patent protection later on.
And filing a PCT application automatically designates pretty much everywhere, doesn't it? Unless you opt out.
That's the default now, yes. It designates all member states bound by the treaty. Understanding this term is key because it defines the potential geographic scope of your protection during that initial international phase.
So these terms from the Treaty and Rules Article 2, Rule 2, they create this universal PCT language. Ensures everyone means the same thing by receiving office or international application.
That's the core idea, harmonization. But of course, the journey doesn't end in the international phase.
Right. Eventually, you have to enter the national stage in individual countries if you want an actual patent granted there.
Precisely. And that's where national laws and procedures have to interact with the PCT framework.
Which brings us to the U.S. specific definitions.
Exactly. This is another reason MPP 1802 is so useful. It doesn't just point to the international sources, it also directs you to the U.S. specific ones.
Because U.S. law needs to clarify how PCT concepts apply here, or define terms unique to the USPTO's handling of PCT applications.
You got it. Sometimes it's about tailoring an international definition for the U.S. legal context. Sometimes it's defining purely U.S.-related procedural terms within the PCT process.
And MPPP 1802 tells us these definitions are scattered a bit. In the U.S. Code, the CFR, even the PCT Administrative Instructions.
That's right. Specifically, it points to 35 U.S.C. Section 351.
Which is in MPP Appendix L.
Correct. And then 37 CFR Section 1.9 and 1.401.
Appendix R for those.
Yep. And also Section 101 of the PCT Administrative Instructions found in Appendix AI. These all contain relevant definitions for U.S. practice.
Okay, let's break those down a bit. What does 35 U.S.C. Section 351 cover?
Section 351 provides definitions specifically for Chapter 36 of Title 35. That's the part of the U.S. patent statute dealing directly with the PCT. So it defines terms like international application and international publication from the perspective of U.S. law.
Okay, the statutory layer. And then the regulations in 37 CFR, Sections 1.9 and 1.401.
Right, these add the regulatory detail. Section 1.9 has general definitions for the patent rules, but includes some PCT-specific terms as they apply in the U.S. Section 1.401 is even more focused, defining terms specifically related to how the USPTO handles PCT matters.
The source material used 37 CFR Section 1.9, defining international application as an example. How does that differ from or add to the PCT Article 2 definition?
That's a perfect example of the layering. PCT Article 2 gives the basic international meaning and application filed under the treaty, but 37 CFR Section 1.9 provides the U.S. regulatory context. Meaning, when U.S. regulations talk about an international application, maybe regarding fees or translation requirements, or how it enters the U.S. national stage, this is the definition they're using, it might specify conditions for it to be recognized by the USPTO, or how it relates to U.S. continuation practice, things like that.
I see. So it's not contradicting the PCT definition, but tailoring it for implementation within the specific rules and procedures of the U.S. system.
Precisely. It adds that necessary layer of U.S. operational detail.
Which you absolutely need if you're actually prosecuting the application here.
You do. And these U.S. sources also define other key terms, things like international phase, that period from filing up through search and publication, maybe examination.
Right, in contrasting that with the national stage.
Exactly. The national stage is what happens after the international phase when you pursue examination in specific offices, like the USPTO. The definitions clarify the boundary and the requirements to cross it.
And what about elected office?
That's another term often defined in the U.S. regulations. It relates to choosing specific countries for international preliminary examination under Chapter 2 of the PCT, and how that impacts entering the national stage in those elected countries.
Okay, so the message is clear. If you're dealing with the PCT through the USPTO, you can't just rely on the international definitions from the treaty and rules.
No, definitely not. You absolutely need to understand how U.S. statutes and regulations, as pointed out by MPP 1802, define these terms or add specifically U.S. terms into the mix.
So MPP 1802 is really acting like your master index card for all things definitional in the PCT world, both international and U.S. specific.
That's a great way to put it. It directs you to all the authoritative sources you need to consult. The PCT document for the global basics, and U.S. Code, CFR, and admin instructions for the crucial U.S. layer.
Bringing it all together then, MPP Section 1802 seems deceptively simple on the surface, maybe just a short section.
It is relatively brief, yes.
But its function is huge. It doesn't list hundreds of definitions, but it tells you exactly where to go to find the official ones that govern the entire process.
And mastering that terminology, really internalizing what these terms mean in both contexts, is foundational. Every single step afterwards, calculating deadlines, filing the right papers, understanding your rights in the international phase, transitioning to the national stage, it all hinges on getting the definitions right.
Get them wrong, and you risk procedural errors, missed deadlines.
Or worse, potentially losing substantive rights. It prevents costly mistakes.
It really is like needing the alphabet and grammar before you can read the book. Without a solid grasp of these definitions, navigating the rest of Chapter 1800 or the whole PCT process via the USPTO would be incredibly challenging.
It's the legend for the map, you could say. Without
Yeah.
the legend, the map is just lines and symbols.
Well put. So, the key takeaway from our deep dive into MPP 1802. Don't skip the definitions. Know where Section 1802 points you, and make sure you understand those terms, both the core PCT ones and the U.S. specifics. It's your essential first step.
Absolutely. It really sets the stage for understanding everything else that follows in PCT practice.
Okay. Before we wrap this up, we definitely want to give a special thank you to Mike Shepard. He's the creative director who organized this whole MPP audio series.
Yes, thanks to Mike for making this structured exploration possible. And of course, we have our standard but important disclaimer.
Right. This audio summary, including this look at Section 1802, was put together using AI tools.
It's meant for general educational and informational purposes only. It is definitely not legal advice, and it's no substitute for formal patent bar instruction or consulting a professional.
Absolutely. For the authoritative word, you always need to go to the official MPP itself, or if you're studying, consult your instructor.
And for specific situations, talk to a registered patent practitioner. Don't rely on the summary for legal decisions.
Couldn't agree more. Always check the official sources and get professional advice when needed.
So, as we close out, thinking about this idea of starting with definitions, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Think about any complex area you're trying to get your head around right now. Maybe it's finance, maybe it's a new software, a complex strategy game, even, I don't know, advanced cooking techniques. Isn't truly nailing down the core terminology, the specific language of that field, always the absolute first step, the key that unlocks deeper understanding and real competence?
That's a really interesting point, that foundation of shared meaning.
So maybe something for you, the listener, to consider. What field are you tackling now where perhaps stepping back and really clarifying the fundamental definitions might be the most powerful next step you could take?
A great thought to leave folks with. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into MPEP Section 1802.
We'll catch you next time as we continue working our way through the MPP.